Oh, gee, how safe is that? Where's the operating plan for loading rockets into the back of a truck?
We'll get to it when we got time.
Yeah, I did a lot of operational plans after we did that.
They call that ex post facto planning. It's always successful that way too, by the way. Plan never goes bad that way.
100% success rate that way. And we had these rusted rockets, 107 millimeter Chinese rockets. I remember these banging around in the back of our pickup truck, and we brought them back and seized them. And then we had our source tell the guy that they'd been stolen, and then we started building a case. We ordered opium to start, and the guy went to a bazaar, the Chaprahar Bazaar, with our source, and negotiating. We had a camera. By the way, this was early days too. A lot of the equipment that I had was stuff I sent a source into Pakistan to buy at bazaars. So I was literally using little concealed cameras I bought with my own money at a bazaar in Pakistan, but we wired into his clothing. And so we had this guy walking around the bazaar negotiating for opium with this drug trafficker, and then buying opium and doing an undercover deal with him. And unlike, in DEA, you're not supposed to front money, but it's Afghanistan, and we did that, so he'd give him the money, then we'd wait a few days, and then the drugs would come, and you'd kind of keep your fingers crossed, because if it didn't, you'd be in trouble. But that's just the way they did business there. They wouldn't do it another way. And so we bought opium. Then we ended up buying kilos of heroin from them. And this is the really pure stuff. And again, it's like $2,500 a kilo that, ends up going for, I want to say at the time, it was maybe around 80,000 in New York that it was going for. And that's at the kilo price. If you break it down, it's like $1 million at street value, So you're paying $2,500 for $1 million worth of profit on the back end when you get it to New York. And so we built it up, and we have this guy on tape talking about, whether it's bullets or whether it's bullets or blood, it's all jihad, and all of these kinds of things, talking about how the trafficking itself was jihad, and then talking about the attacks. And he was part of a broader organization. One of the reasons the DEA techniques work so well is these drug groups and terror cells are these amorphous, kind of loosely connected groups with one mission, and they have higher ups, but they're given a lot of leeway in how they do their particular business. So it really was. We did the exact same things we would do for just a drug group, but we did them for terrorist organizations. And I get to we seized this guy. We ended up making an arrest on this guy. We lured him to Jalalabad, and we had him come for a meeting with one of these corrupt officials, and then we did an interdiction on the road and stopped him and arrested him. And then the military held him for a long time while Phil Kearney, one of the agents at the time who was with Special Operations Division, was working like crazy to get the extradition put together. And then we ended up getting him extradited and trying him in Washington, D.C. And that guy will be in jail for life. Just on the drug charges, he got life. And he was the first case that was charged with narco-terrorism, so he's a precedent-setting case. And just last year, they overturned one of those charges. But he'll still be in jail for the rest of his life.
Well, and what years were you there? What years was that?
I got there in April of 2004, and I was there up until around the beginning of 2010, and many years, I was there, when I was the country attaché, I was basically there all the time, right? I was there, 15 straight months with a few minor exceptions. And then when I was with FAST, there were times when we were there a couple times a year, 4-month tours. I was going back because I was involved with other cases that we were working with them, so I was going back to help. I'm probably the only person in history who actually brought 2 kilos of heroin from the United States back into Afghanistan.
Did you sell it?
Now, how did you get it through the airport, our fabulous airport screening? Did you have it in a diplomatic pouch, or?
No, I had it in a duffel bag. So yeah, I went to Dulles and we met the head of security. Because this was a case where we'd seized the drugs, right? And then they decided they wanted to prosecute. And this is another person. I did the first undercover in Afghanistan since before the Taliban, and I negotiated for 500 kilos of heroin to come to New York. And this was a Pakistani warlord who had a dungeon where he kept his enemies. And I met with him a bunch of times. And so anyhow, we ended up arresting him and some of his crew. And we brought and then they decided they didn't want to extradite him. They wanted to try him in Afghanistan. So we're like, okay. So I had to bring the kilos back. So I went to Dulles and I met one of the head of security, and he met me at the gate and everything. And I had literally a duffel bag with a couple of kilos in it with the scorpions on it. And I told him, he said, hey, let's just see what happens. So we run it through the metal detector. Nothing. Go ahead, sir. And so he's the head of security. He goes, hey, run that again. So they run it again. And she's like, nope, looks good. He's like, you don't see anything there?
Well, just so you know, though, they have improved, because on my trip back from Washington last week back to Orlando, TSA secondaried me and confiscated my 5-ounce bottle of New Hampshire maple syrup, because it was over the 3-ounce limit. So Steve Dow, one of our biggest fans here on Game of Crimes and Patreon and everything, please let Frank know. I'm sorry, I lost the maple syrup. TSA got it.
You know what you should have done, Murph, is drink 2 ounces right there and then put the cap on it and stick it in there and send it through. And then you're still walking through security with 5 ounces of maple syrup.
I flew to Boston a couple of weeks ago and they seized a tube of Crest toothpaste from me, but apparently the 2 kilos of pure heroin was fine.
It's fine because it's going out of the country. We don't care. Hey, no, the reason I asked you for the dates is because I want to ask you, because at some point, obviously, Operation Neptune Spear, the operation to get bin Laden, he was in Abbottabad, just north of Islamabad there, and you guys were going in, like, say, Pakistan. Were you getting any chatter at that time, or were you, was that part of a standard thing that you guys were doing? I don't want to, dramatize it too much, but was looking for bin Laden on anybody's radar at that time, or were you getting any chatter about it, considering
he was on
next
everybody's?
door?
Yeah, everybody's radar, right? Like all the top leadership. I mean, what a lot of people don't know is like the Taliban themselves were not, the Afghan Taliban was not designated by the U.S. Department of State as a
terrorist group.
Right. And so like we would have some of these top level Afghan Taliban guys that were killing U.S. troops, and we couldn't get the same level of support because they weren't part of this terrorist group. So everybody was Al-Qaeda focused, and so you get sources. Everyone wanted to tell you where, bin Laden was. Everybody. So no, I had nothing credible on him. We had other Taliban guys. We had a Taliban recruiter, or excuse me, an Al-Qaeda recruiter. We had a lot of other high level people, but not him. We watched the Predators take off every night and come back empty. That really was a hot place to be. And at that eastern Afghanistan and Konar and Nangarhar and everything near the Khyber Pass, there was a lot of activity there. We did some really interesting and fun cases.
Yeah, but they're interesting and fun. But at the end of the day, this reminds me so much. My dad was a World War II and a Vietnam vet, so he was over there during Vietnam. And I'm a huge student of history, and so I've looked at the different wars and stuff. But it seems to me that kind of the issue we had in Afghanistan, especially because of the terrain as opposed to Iraq, but still with Iraq, is we're dealing with people, even though they're numerically outnumbered, we've got better weapons, we got better tech. You've got people, they've lived in that same land for 2,000 years. They know these passes. They know the terrain. They know the geography inside and out. And yet they're able to, Russia left Afghanistan. We've left Afghanistan. And who's still there? The Afghans, the same people all over again, the Taliban.
I think we had one combat fatality in the last year before our pullout. We didn't up until the actual pullout, right, when we lost 13 soldiers at Abbey Gate. But yes, they knew the territory, they knew the mountain passes, but so did we. We really hampered ourselves in a lot of ways. We right at the beginning, we pulled most of our assets and they were in Iraq, so we didn't have the assets we really needed to fully prosecute the war. I knew we were in trouble right from the beginning when Musharraf and Bush agreed not to go into Pakistan. The Al-Qaeda was fleeing across the border, and we basically let them. We did things in the border region, but that you can't have a safe zone, and that's really what it was. The whole Fatah was a safe zone for the Taliban and for Al-Qaeda and for all these other groups, the Haqqani network. So they were on the run, and they were taking a beating by our military for decades. And so I don't look at it as an unwinnable war. What the Soviets did when they were there, they were getting just hammered, but our military is on a whole different level. We didn't have a lot of the resources, and then we really hamstrung our own people with what they could do and what they couldn't do. And quite honestly, one of the things I was trying to do there was show that there was a judicial solution to going after some of these high value targets, because when the military would detain somebody, they would often take them to the Bagram detention center, And then it was just a matter of time till they got out. So there'd be somebody who was shooting at U.S. troops. They'd take him into custody if he wasn't killed in action. They'd put him into a detention facility, and 18 months later, 24 months later, whatever, he's getting released. He's going back out. But now he's a hero because, right, they couldn't hold him, and he's got all this street cred. And it just wasn't a solution for what we were doing, And when you're talking about like radical ideologues, they have to just stay in jail forever. You have to either kill them or they have to stay in jail forever.
Yeah, there is no rehab program. I mean, there is no counter programming, decultifying for a lot of these folks. If they're hardcore, from beginning to end.
And it's not most of the people over there. It's a very small minority, right? But they're the ones who are driving everything. And so it's just sort of tragic how we left. We had so many allies over there and so many people that we trained. We spent a long time trying to give them a better life, and there were so many Afghans who were fully on board for it. And we basically had a stalemate. We weren't doing what we had to do to completely destroy the enemy, but we also weren't taking there wasn't a lot of combat going on. And we held most of the country, and to just leave like that is just insane. I mean, it will continue to become the bigger and bigger hotbed of terrorism, and they will export again. I mean, there's a place they know we're not coming back, right? So it's just a place where they can train. It's a place where they can have meetings, and we've really shot ourselves in the foot because we don't have the intelligence capacity that we would have had we kept a couple of bases over there. Had we kept Bagram and Kandahar, we could have projected power. We could have kept our drones up. We could have kept our sources going. And we could have kept a government in power that was working with us as an ally, as opposed to what we have now. And I was hearing things then, and I'm still hearing it, where, they're talking about working with the Taliban, and, like this idea that somehow that it's just another, that we've done something wrong for them not to like us. And if we just get along with them, that's not who they are. And that's not what they want. They are seeking a worldwide caliphate. And they're supported by the Muslim Brotherhood, and they have a single goal. And until we realize that there really is a black and white nature to this conflict, it'll never end.
And I'm not sure if you know this, Jeff, but the person, and I know Morgan had mentioned it to you earlier, that we have Adam Gamal on. In fact, his episode is out the week that we're talking to you, and he talks a lot about the Muslim Brotherhood, and he gives examples. He's got a book out that we promoted.
He's from Egypt too. He's from Alexandria, Egypt,
and he talks about how bad the Muslim Brotherhood is. So for you to bring that up and tie it right into the Taliban, it just reinforces what he's already told us.
I mean, they're behind Hamas. They're behind Al Qaeda. They're behind every major Islamic group, both Sunni and Shia. By the way, they've worked with Sunni and Shia historically. My wife is a leading expert on the Muslim Brotherhood. She's written The Secret Apparatus, which is just a brilliant book.
Which I have an autographed copy here. Thank you very much. I told her that night we met. I said, "That's you? I'll take a go." She goes, "Let me get you a book." So she got me a book. So nice.
Yeah, I mean, it really is the definitive work on the Muslim Brotherhood. It's in their own words. It's from their own documents. She's been spent decades investigating these people. Actually, there's a television series in Egypt that just came out that's basically right out of the historical chapters from her book. So much so that people around Egypt have been calling her and talking in the press about how they've taken her book and made a series out of it. It's the most expensive television series in Egypt's history. And the government had to come out and refute it, that it's not her work. But it is.
It's funny you should mention that in a sense, because we talk about how the hell we've never and it's up to the State Department. State Department is who designates groups as terrorist groups, foreign terrorist organizations. We've never designated the Taliban as a foreign terrorist organization, but yet Egypt, which was the birthplace of the Muslim Brotherhood, knows how bad it is. They've outlawed the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood is a terrorist organization in Egypt.
Sure. Well, under Morsi, they were run by the Muslim Brotherhood. And I mean, people in Egypt know how bad it is. I mean, worldwide, more Muslims than any other religious group suffer from the Muslim Brotherhood and these radical Islamists. They're the number one target of radical Islamists. So it's something people really should be aware of. And I'm constantly, I'm only persuaded by facts, and I'm constantly surprised by how little people within positions of power within our government and overseas actually know about what's going on.
Well,
yeah,
there's a shocker.
There's an opportunity for me to get back on my soapbox, but I'm not.
Go ahead. I dare you, Murph. Dare you. Go ahead.
Okay. So,
gee, that was tough. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Before COVID, a lobby group out of San Francisco brought Javier and I on board, and they represent pharmacies and pharmacists, not big pharma. And the whole purpose was to bring, to reveal how bad counterfeit medications are. And it wasn't, fentanyl was just beginning then. That wasn't the big focus. But so we went and spoke on the Senate side one time and on the House side the next year. And that same year, we went to the American Legislative Exchange Conference. They had one of their biannual conferences down in, I think it was in Austin, Texas. And of all these politicians, I'll bet you 95, maybe higher percent had no clue that counterfeit medications were an issue in our country. One guy was a former police officer, and he came to me and afterwards. He's like, I had no clue. Thank you for coming and telling us this. And we're taking in horror stories about, we had Carrie Luther came in and told about the death of her son who took a quarter of a Xanax, turned out to be counterfeit and never woke up. We had some sisters come in, and their sister was a manager of an Outback Steakhouse who was unloading boxes, pulled a muscle in her back. One of her friends gave her a muscle relaxer, and when she fell asleep, she never woke up. And all these deaths are going on, and you see it seems like, now people are aware of the issues with counterfeit medications, especially as it's associated with fentanyl and the opioid addiction and so forth. But for our leaders, and I gotta be real honest, I love DEA, I bleed blue. But we were negotiating a television series with DEA prior to COVID, and we're on the 12th floor. One time I had our producers up there with us, meeting public affairs, and I saw some people on the 12th floor that I knew, old friends, and I said, hey, just by the way, what are you guys doing? What's the focus and what's DEA's position on counterfeit meds right now? They're like, Murph, that's not a problem. That's not even on our radar. We don't even recognize that as a problem. And it was already overwhelming our country. It's just, God bless. I love you guys. But now it's taken
a huge percentage of the overdose deaths are from counterfeit drugs, or people don't think they're taking fentanyl. It's just adulterated.
Exactly. That's, and as much, Javier is like my own brother. We're just like flesh and blood, but I wouldn't even take a Tylenol from him, and I wouldn't give him one from me either. I'll go get my own. I don't think,
considering who Javier hung around when he was down there in Bogota, there's probably a lot of things Javier had you don't want him sharing with you.
I'm not going there.
Thank you very much. Actually, I'll tell you, there's another good book to read. I told you a friend of mine, Stephen Coughlin, was an advisor. He was a MI guy, but advised the Joint Chiefs right before 9/11 and after. I'm reading his latest book. It's called Catastrophic Failure, Blindfolding America in the Face of Jihad. Between your wife's book and his book, it's kind of like if people want an education. Because I think that's part of the problem. We get into discussing these things and people, I saw a tweet one time that said this. It's like, have you done any just basic research? Have you just get beyond Google? Go find some, authenticated stuff. Go, find some article, scholar. But no, we get past that. Anyway, let's roll back into this though, because this is it. We kind of didn't. We talked about an operation, but I like what we're talking about here though too, because you're really talking about everywhere we go in the world. The FBI is a much bigger organization than DEA, right? So you would think that, hey, man, they cover a lot of things. But every country you go, name one country that you go into to where there is not a nexus of drug activity that fuels criminal behavior, illicit, everything, from sex trafficking. The cartels now are getting involved in everything, how they get their start in drugs. Is there any place anymore that is safe from the quote scourge of drugs? Other, you might say Singapore, because they kind of tightly control things, but even they got problems. Drugs have continued to be. I don't see a time to where drugs will not be a thread that pulls through all of society. It's a little bit worse here in the U.S. than it ought to be. But I can't think of anywhere in the world where doesn't affect them that same way.
It's everywhere, and it's because of the profit margins. Like I've read some. There's some really good like UN reporting that comes out on drugs and organized crime and things around the world. And organized crime in Europe is about a third of it is funded directly from narcotics. There's about, I think the last stat I saw was 37% of all the U.S. designated terrorist groups have a link to narcotics. I think the number is probably much higher, but that's like a proven link to narcotics. It's when you can buy something for $2,500 and sell it for $100,000, like you don't see profit margins like that anywhere else, and especially with something that's easily smugglable. The immediate problem for us really is fentanyl. It's China. It's China for a lot of reasons, right? But they have openly declared doing a secret war. I mean, there's a good book called Blood Money that's come out that's using actual like emails and hacked from China to where their people in the government are talking about this is their strategy. I mean, China doesn't really hide the ball. They know what they're doing. Like it's like this whole TikTok controversy, right? It's a propaganda weapon for them. TikTok in China is nothing like TikTok in America. They're doing it as a way to destabilize our culture. And so once we realize that there's nefarious forces in the world, there's some really bad countries. Iran is one of the worst countries in the world. The people are wonderful. The Persian people are fantastic. I know plenty of them. I know people who've had to flee Iran, right, for human rights advocates. I have friends who are Iranian. Like it's not the people. It's this horrible government run by these radical mullahs. And Iran is a problem. China is a problem. Russia is a problem. North Korea is a problem. I mean, there are bad forces in the world. And we have to recognize that, and we have to call it out. And I think our politicians need to start, for one, acknowledging it, but then explaining to people why it's bad and what we're doing.
Well, Mexico is becoming an evil player too. This Obregon, the president down there,
fucking just came extorting us, the douchebag.
Well, he only wants $20 billion a year. But, he said he wants that spread out in Latin American countries, lift sanctions on Venezuela, end the Cuban embargo, and legalize millions of Mexicans that are already living in the U.S.
He's a communist. I mean,
who the hell does he think he is?
You know what? Simple solution for that. You want to, okay, pal, you want to do that? Do like what they did when they wouldn't turn over when we're trying to go after guys who killed Kiki Camarena. Shut down the fucking border, shut down the trade, shut down everything, and see how long this guy's going to last.
Well, if a certain person gets elected, that may be what happens.
Well, hey, but I was going to tell you too, though, you talked about how the Chinese are open. A great book I got onto many years ago, but it was written by two Chinese PLA officers. If you get the chance to pull it up, it's called Unrestricted Warfare, China's Master Plan to Destroy America.
Yeah, and they lay out, that's what they call it, unrestricted warfare. That's actually the term the Chinese use for that.
And that's their book, and that it lays it all. It's almost like the exploratory memorandum that the Muslim Brotherhood did. They laid out, here's what we're going to do. It's almost like Mein Kampf. Hitler laid out, here's what I'm going to do. Our enemy tend to give us their doctrine, and it's to our detriment that we don't listen to what our enemy says. This is what I'm going to do. Well, no, they're not going to really do that. Yeah, they are. That's what they said they're going to do, and then that's exactly what they do.
And yet we're surprised when it happens.
Can't believe we thought we could hug our way out of it.
I mean, we haven't tried that on a grand scale. I suppose we could. The narcotics is a big part of it too, with the funding. I mean, I told you guys I'm libertarian, right? But I mean, there's some drugs that are just so dangerous they could never be legalized, like fentanyl, like carfentanil, which is like a 50 times
even worse,
stronger. Yeah, it's like it was initially, developed as a weapon of mass destruction. If you get a packet of that and you drop it on a subway and everybody's dead, some of this stuff is just way too powerful. But the drugs itself, I've years ago, I think in 2016 or something, I broke down like narcoterrorism, the new narcoterrorism, into like 4 groups. And one is like what you guys are familiar with, the Pablo Escobar model, kind of the classic model, and using terrorism as a way to further drug interests. And then there's guys like Khan Mohammed that are both like legitimate terrorists, ideologues, and also drug traffickers. And then you get the where they're helping each other. Like I had one Taliban commander. This guy used to walk around with a sword, so he'd cut off the hands of cooperators and things. But he was actually involved in a few drug deals, not because he was a drug trafficker, but just to fund specific like terror operations he was doing. But the thing you see most often, you saw this in Afghanistan all the time, but you see it, I'm sure in Colombia, you see it all over the world, is where you have drug traffickers and terrorists staying in their own lanes, but they're helping each other, right? So like in Afghanistan, they were providing all the support. The drug traffickers, when the Taliban crews or the Haqqani groups would come across from Pakistan to do attacks, the traffickers would send guides to bring them through the mountains. They let them stay at their camps, and they provide them with food and weapons and ammunition. They let them store things there. They drive them to their attacks. After the attacks, they'd help them get out. The drug traffickers would provide intelligence and corrupt officials so they could do things. And then anyone who's threatening those drug traffickers, like in return, the Taliban would go after those people, and threaten the populace and create these impermissive environments where the drug traffickers could work because people from the government weren't there. So we saw that. Like earlier, you mentioned Haji Badshaw. He was the world's most prolific heroin trafficker, right? It was somebody, when I got there in 2004, beginning of 2005, we were already getting information about this guy. He alone, we have ledgers from this guy, just to give you the nutshell, that showed he was responsible for 19.7% of the world's heroin in a single year period. That's by the UNODC estimates. Like he was doing like hundreds of thousands of kilos of heroin. This guy, it was just remarkable, the amount of drugs that he was doing. He was distributing directly through, that we could prove through ledgers and through our witnesses. He was distributing to 22 countries. This was the guy, the world's biggest drug trafficker, and he was directly supporting the Taliban. He was speaking at these huge events where he was talking about, growing poppy as a way to wage jihad. And he was giving tens of thousands of dollars at a time to Taliban groups to continue their
Sounds a little bit like Pablo, doesn't it, Murph? Go out, spread the money around, get the public on your side, do community projects.
Funny how the bad guys learn from history, but we don't, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's outrageous. Can you tell us just a little bit? How did you guys get into Haji, into Bachko?
I mean, so he was like initially there were so many big players, right? Because this was 90% of the world's heroin was coming out of Afghanistan. So we were hearing a lot, more and more about him. And then when the fast teams arrived, we started working with the Brits, and we were working with other special forces from around the world, and we were hitting labs and things, and we were just developing intelligence. And eventually we did like what DEA does, and we just said, hey, let's just get a source. So we developed a source through one of our other sources who had a history with him, who had done opium deals with him many years before, and it was a trusted person. And we did phone calls directly with Haji Badshaw and set up deals where drugs were set up. And then, they use the hawalas over there. So they're the Sarafi markets where you have hawaladars. And that's essentially like you have two hawaladars who work together, right? Like one in New York and one in Kabul. And if I want to get money to New York, I give $100,000 to the one hawaladar in Kabul. He calls the guy in New York and says, when someone brings you this code, give them $100,000. And so the money never actually transfers, and like every 6 months or whatever, they balance their books, who owes who money, and it's usually done through familial connections. So it's cousins who trust each other or whatever.
And those hawalas are some of the most. I mean, it's in a sense it's ingenious, but you want to talk about how to avoid money laundering. Cash is never moving across international lines like that.
Yeah,
you take you take a code like you say. Yeah.
And so we seize these ledgers with we hit a Sarafi market in Jalalabad with, so like when we did this deal, the first deal for a couple of kilos, we went and dropped off money with a hawaladar at a Sarafi market in downtown Jalalabad, and then called Haji Badshaw, and he said, yep, he's got the money or whatever, come pick up the kilos on this date. And we went and picked up the kilos, did surveillance like DEA does. Then later we went and hit the Sarafi market and seized the ledgers. And I think we had 47 major drug traffickers that were in that book from that one hawaladar. That's one guy at a Sarafi market that's filled with hawaladars. And then we did multiple. The different fast teams did multiple search warrants at compounds and at labs. I mean, we hit so many labs over the years, and because Badshaw was so big, he was working, like there were independent producers, and then they would work for multiple drug traffickers. So you'd go hit like a lab complex up in the mountains. We'd fly in on helos and jump out, and we'd blow up the labs, and they would work for him. So we were developing all this intelligence, but in the end, it was the search warrants and then the actual witnesses that we developed over time who could stand up in court and point to the guy and say, I was there when he gave Mullah Kabir, $47,000 to fight the jihad. And so we had overwhelming evidence. We ended up, his narco terrorism case. We ended up charging him with the 2 kilos of heroin. We were able to show 19.7% of the world's heroin came from this guy. I mean, it's insane, right? It was the in the ledgers that we took from his compound. We had $261 million worth of Afghan heroin. That's $2,500, $2,700 a piece, right? A kilo. It's billions of dollars. I want to say with the street value, if it all came to the U.S., was like $8 billion, right? That's 1 year that this guy was doing. We were able to show all that in the actual records and had witnesses who could corroborate this is what was being done. This is where it was going. And in the end, there was a problem with one of our witnesses, and it's from the IC. So I just want to, there was another agency that had some information that we didn't have at trial. And so we were going to have to retry him on one of the charges. That's essentially what it came down to. So they dismissed the narco terrorism charge and we didn't retry him on it. We convicted him on it. This is years later. It's like 4 years later, they dismissed it. But we didn't retry him on it because, I mean, this case, I think we had 17 witnesses from as far away as Hong Kong and, trying to bring Afghans here. And the trial cost a lot of money, took a lot of time, a lot of manpower. But so Bacho ended up getting released. A judge resentenced him. So remember, this is a guy that we can show sold 123,000 kilos of heroin in 1 year. And we bought actual kilos from him. And the judge kept those charges, the kilos that we convicted him on. She kept those charges, but she reduced his sentence to like 10 years and even gave him credit for some of the time when he'd been held in Pakistan. Not even on our charges. It was the most egregious thing I've ever seen. Like I remember the DOJ attorney standing up and saying, "This is the biggest drug dealer any of us is likely to ever see in our lifetimes." And, we believe he should never see the light of day, or, words to that effect. And she gave him it was like 12 years, I think.
And he was sentenced to life in prison originally.
Because we had.
Yeah, but that's a guideline, guys. Come on, anymore these days. That's just kind of a suggestion. It's not really a hard and fast rule. I mean, you're in on a Monday for homicide, first degree murder. You're out on a Friday. Come on, that's the way things work now.
And just for our listeners, just so you know, he was released on December 16th, 2022, a year and a half ago. The biggest freaking one of the biggest heroin dealers ever convicted. Just like you said, the attorney said, but we'll probably never see a drug dealer this big again. No, and he's a free man again.
In that 1 year, when he was paying, tons of money to the Taliban, when, all those drugs, there were over 500 coalition deaths that year from in Afghanistan. There were over 300 Americans killed and over 2,000 Americans injured that year in Afghanistan. And this was the guy who was funding them. I mean, this was the guy. Everybody knew him. He corrupted officials. He was huge. He was like the Godfather over there. When we had one of our sources over there was they threatened to boil him in oil. We were lucky to get him out before they killed him. I mean, this is just real evil. Yeah. And so that was a travesty.
And I'm sure he's now pro-American, and he's gone over trying to convince the Taliban to give up their cause and let's cooperate with the United States. It's, you know what? And then we wonder why we can't protect our country. The judge, good Lord, what the heck was she thinking?
So there was information, like derogatory information, that we didn't have during the trial, even though we'd asked for it, and we didn't know it existed. And so, I understand that if any U.S. agency has derogatory information and there's a federal case, it has to be given to the defense. Now, in this particular case, I saw the information, and I can tell you it had no effect at all. It was nothing bad, and it was nothing that couldn't have easily been fixed. It wouldn't have had any effect on the trial at all. But because of that, we had to retry him, and it was just too big, and we had too many people were killed. We had witnesses attacked. We had police officers' families attacked over there. Shootouts. It was like the Wild West before. Now, of course, all these guys are on the run. I can't tell you how many guys I've tried to help get out of there.
Yeah, it's funny because it's only happened a couple of times. We've had a couple of Afghanis reach out to Javier and I through our social media sites asking for help, and we turn it over to DEA, and I won't take it any farther than that. But they're dealing with it.
Yeah, well, you and I got hit up quite a bit when that withdrawal happened. I remember us getting some messages on Facebook, on our group and stuff, from guys that said, "Hey, I'm NIU, I'm this guy, everything." Hey, wanted to the reason it just was clicking when we kept talking about Haji Bacho. When I was over in Ankara doing some stuff for the State Department, the guys from the Turkish National Police and the what they call the Jandarma, which is the other there's the Turkish National Police and the Jandarma, but they took us out to eat after our training. That's why I kept laughing. We went out to Haji Baba's. So Haji Baba's is a great restaurant over there in Ankara. Iskandar and the Kunefe, I highly recommend it if you go there.
Yeah, luckily not the same guy.
Yeah.
You may not come out of that restaurant.
Might have been a close relative. Who knows? Hey, well, look. Before we go here, let's talk about this because we did have a one-stop start, but we're back on track. But you've got. We were just talking too. We talked about the books you had out. Like the Forever Game is your latest release. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, it's a mystery thriller. It deals with artificial intelligence. It's when life-saving technology can be deadly.
Yeah, it's called The Forever Game, and you guys can go find it over on JeffreyJamesHiggins.com, JeffreyJamesHiggins.com. You can find it there. But I also saw one you talk about, you're on the hook too, so we're keeping you from your writing because you are owed a book is due pretty soon here, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually working on one with my agent right now that he wants to go out with, and that's hopefully I'm going to send that out tomorrow. Then I have another one that I'm working with Severn River Publishing for a espionage thriller, and that's due. So I've been working with their structural editor, so I'm going to get that back. And then I have a new book. It's due in August, which I haven't started yet. So better get writing.
Due in August.
Yeah. I mean, I can write a first draft in 5 or 6 weeks usually, I mean, honestly, I don't know about you guys, but everyone says, when they hear you're a writer, they're like, oh, I'm going to write a book. You can always find the time. If you write for an hour a day, if you write for half an hour a day, write a page a day, you're going to write a book in a year. So I usually, when I'm first drafting, I usually go for about 2,000 words a day. Sometimes I'll do 3, just sort of, I average at least 2,000. So I can knock out a first draft in 5 or 6 weeks. And then, spend a month or 2 editing. So I'll be able to do it. I just need, I'm a big outliner, so I need to really get into the character arcs and has multiple plots. It's an espionage thriller, so it's complicated. So I have a couple of ideas. I've got to figure out what the actual story is.
Sounds like every relationship that somebody talks about on social media. Are you dating? Well, it's complicated. That's complicated. We were talking too. I use Scrivener too, so that's my main writing tool. I love using that because I love the ability to, order stuff, move stuff around and structure things. And I'm the same way too. I'll write about 2,000 words a day when I get going. Now I'm in the edit phase, so I got my edits back, my editorial documents. So I have, if this were a crime scene, there would be tape around my novel right now because there's a lot of red on it. So,
you know what though? It's honestly like a lot of it's subjective. So I don't take everything that like editors suggest, but a lot of it, like my agent Jackson Keeler at Inkworks, really knows structure, and the guy, like, we spent a lot of time before we signed, just talking and making sure we were aligned. And it's so nice to have somebody who understands what they're doing. And at Severn River, the structural editor who looked at this espionage thriller did a fantastic job. I couldn't do everything he wanted to do because of size limitations and things, but he made it better. So I think that's just sort of your guiding star. Anything you do that if you agree with it and it feels right when they make the suggestion, go for it. And it'll be better than if you had just done it yourself.
Well, no,
it's one of the reasons. Sorry, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, finish up.
Yeah, it's why, like, it's one of the advantages of traditional publishing, that you don't necessarily have in self-publishing, and you can if you get your own editor, and if you go out. So if you are self-publishing, I really recommend you go out and get someone who's worked for some major publishers in the past. And if you're self-publishing, you have to be a publisher, right? So you have to do everything. You need structural editing and copy line editing and proofreading. You have to have a good cover designer. You have to be able to get your book out there. You have to do marketing.
And you got to market it all yourself. Yeah. I just went to the Potomac Writers Workshop this last weekend. It was held down in Arlington. It was interesting. I mean, I ran into a couple agents that are out here in Loudoun County, sent off 3 chapters. They're taking a look at things now, but it's just interesting because, just like you said, I think the traditional publishing, that's where I see people fall down. But the biggest thing is, a lot of people say, I want to write a book. I said, no, I'm beyond wanting to write a book. This is about getting published. Anybody can write a book. And then if, a lot of works remain, they just fall off the face of the earth. They remain incomplete. But it's that stick-to-itiveness, that persistence that gets you through, and so I just look at it this way, because the guy I'm working with, we've had him on our show, Ryan Steck. It's just kind of like, hey, which he knows was my intro to Mark Greaney that night. It's just kind of like, hey, I look at it this way. It's like anything else. It's like working a case. It's just embrace the suck. It's part of the process. What's the hardest part of a case? It's usually doing all the frickin' paperwork, filling out the forms, filing the reports. Working the case is easy. Administering the case, that's the bitch.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. I mean, I find a lot of joy in the writing. Like, writing a first draft is my favorite part. I enjoy the outlining. I enjoy thinking up the story, and in writing, it's a lot of fun. I don't like the editing as much, but when you see it getting progressively better, like, that is satisfying. But that's the part I like least. But there's a lot to the business itself. There's a lot to getting an agent and querying and finding the right publisher, and then marketing and getting your book to the right places. And I mean, there's a lot to it. I would tell any of your listeners that are thinking about writing, whatever, don't spend $1 to anybody, because there's this huge predatory industry that's cropped up, and everybody wants your money, and it's almost never worth it. So write the book, try to find an agent, try to find a publisher. If you want to self-publish, talk to people who've done it so you know how to do it properly, because there's 2.3 million self-published books every year, and 99% of them are not ready to be published. So there's a lot of noise that you have to break out of, and there's 300,000+ traditionally published books too. So you have competition there as well. But if you do self-publish, your book has to be indistinguishable from anything a big 5 publisher would put out.
And I heard a name for those people that you're talking about, because you never pay money to that. They call them predators, Preditors, like editors, but predators. So
Yeah,
there's even a
there's
site
a bunch
that tracks them.
Yeah, I mean, there's all these like vanity publishers who call themselves hybrid, and they make their money from the author, not from selling your book.
They charge you $15,000 to $20,000. Oh, we'll help you do your book and everything, and then you get the book, and it's like, okay, you're going to help me market it? No, you got to go do it yourself. Now, if you're doing a business, now there's a thing to be said. If you're like a real estate agency, or you're doing something and you want to write a book to say, I've done a book, that's a business expense. I mean, you say, okay, I'm going to write this to say, hey, I've got a book on how to do X. But if you're paying somebody to write your book for you, it's kind of like, yeah, you're right. Here we go. Once again, the awkward pause there was Murph has, what the fuck are you,
I don't know.
what are you touching?
It's
like Jeff says, show me, it's like Manos Arribas, show me your hands. I want to see your hands. Don't touch
I got them behind my head now.
I've had a couple weeks of technical problems, so I'm no better. I know what you're going through.
For those listening, we are closing out. This is our 3rd round of restart.
If it sounds a little sketchy here, that's why.
Just shit happens. Well, hey, let's close out by this. So let's, have you got titles for what's coming out? I mean, are you committed to the dates now? Is that something we can officially announce, or do we need to just tease people by saying, just go to your site and check it out?
Yeah, so JeffreyJamesHiggins.com is a link to everything. The Forever Game just came out, and that's with Black Rose Writing. That's a mystery thriller, which I'm getting great reviews, so I'm excited about that. The next book that'll come out, it will be The Havana Syndrome, which is with Seven River Publishing, and that's coming out in June of 2025. So it'll be a while. And then I've got a few other projects in the works, and I'll be doing 2 books a year with Seven River for the next couple of years.
Wow,
nice.
That's a lot of work, though.
Yeah, it's fun though.
Yeah.
When you're not at the restaurant, right? Elaine's, making things happen, right?
That's right. Yeah, but that's fun too. Honestly, being able to help writers, and you get together in a room with 50 readers and writers, and I mean, it's just a lot of fun. Those are really, really good events.
Well, that's the old saying: find that job you like, you'll never work a day in your life. Sounds like you found it, brother. Again.
Yeah, it's true. It is definitely true. If you're passionate about what you do, you don't mind working long hours.
Excellent.
Yeah. Of course, that night I was a little concerned when Jeff came in. He had his helmet back on. He had some BDUs on. And he's like, where is that motherfucker? Oh, I'm sorry, wrong place.
Yeah, I'm okay.
I don't have PTSD.
What? Where's he at? Bin Laden? Who? Where? No. Hey, this is so much fun. By the way, and the reason I do this, I love learning about other people's processes, how they write. I'm more of a hybrid. I've tried doing a total outline, but then what I realized is I would get off my outline. But what I do now is I do a hybrid. I learned from, it's called the story grid, but I know what my ending's going to be, and I know what my major waypoints are going to be. And then as I write, I've got like a little, right here. Actually, I use something like this by the day. So during the day, I collect my thoughts. I say, okay, what am I going to write tomorrow? So I let things percolate in my head. And then, so it's kind of a modified outline. When I start to write the next day, I know what I'm going to write about because I tie it back to. But we've had several authors on, and I love some of the ways that they structure about how they do things. Now, final thing here: when you write it, and as you write a passage, do you go back and reread your work from the previous day, look at it, and then fix it, and then move on, or are you just like, just knocking things out, just chapter after chapter?
Yeah, I have to keep my forward momentum. So, I do what you do. Like I have about the 15 major story beats. I break it into 3 acts. If the story starts changing, I let it because the story's telling me the characters are driving what has to happen. But I usually have a pretty solid outline, and I probably get rid of a third of the scenes that I have planned, and I add another third. So it definitely changes, and I think it's really important to allow yourself to grow and change with the story. But I get that process where people reread the day before, it gets their head into the space, they edit, so by the time they finish, they've already had one major edit pass. So that makes sense to me, but I can't write like that. I just need to just keep moving forward. I need to rush to that finish line, have a big, giant, ugly first draft, and then it's something I can work with to just,
as I call it, a shitty first draft. But I like what they say. They say throw up, then clean up. Just throw up on the page. You go back later and clean up. But
yeah, and I've written, I think, 11 books at this point, and the more I write, the better that first draft becomes. Like I don't make all the craft mistakes, So it is a lot cleaner. Like as I'm writing sentences, they're pretty good sentences, to begin with. I don't write passive. I don't do all the problems that, that I did when I first started. So, I mean, there's still plenty of problems, but it's easier. Instead of like 30 or 40 editing iterations, I maybe do 3 to 5.
Yeah. And kill off the adverbs. That's one thing I learned from reading Stephen King. Kill adverbs, no adverb.
Yeah. I hardly use them at all.
There we go. I hardly use them. I use them hardly.
That's right.
So to speak. Well, no, but last thing here, the other thing too is as you learn the craft, and I'm learning a lot more. I mean, I've written for business stuff for a long time, but writing a novel is a little bit different. But my throw up was 160,000 words. But I'll tell you what, I sat down, I cleaned it up. I'm at 98,000 words.
Oh, good for you. Yeah, that's hard. And they get, the more you write, the tighter it gets to begin with. But I can always go through, like I just went through a draft and it was 104,000, and I knocked like 4,500 words out of it, just tightening every sentence by sentence. How do I say that quicker? Do I need the sentence? Just doing that really tight line edit.
Well, how many words are there typically in a book?
Depends on the genre. Generally it has to be about 60,000 to be considered like a novel length. If you're looking at like historical fiction or fantasy, it could be 150,000. Everything else is like a sweet spot's around 80 to 90,000.
And for first novels, they wanted under 100,000. I mean, there's one thing I learned too. One of the reasons why they want it that way, Murph, they want a shorter novel now rather than longer. It's expensive to print hardcover books. If you have a 120,000 word novel versus a 100,000 word novel, that's 20,000 more words they got to print, So everything is a business decision in the publishing industry,
especially for a debut, because people don't want to spend as much on it when they're risking, they haven't read an author before. And but like things like romance and westerns and things like that, they can be a lot shorter too. Like you'll see romance at 50,000, 60,000.
Most coloring books are only 4 pages, so he's got it dialed in.
I can buzz through one of those in about a month.
Well, hey, look, before we get kicked off of this interview again by Murph, don't touch anything. Just sit back. Show me your hands. Okay, show me your hands.
I'm just touching my chair.
Back away slowly, sir. Back away. Well, hey, let's bring this. So, go to Jeffrey, Jeffrey, JeffreyJamesHiggins.com. Get his book. The latest one out is Forever Game. He's got some more coming out, too. If you're in Alexandria, you got to go visit Elaine's. Where's Elaine's located at?
It's at 208 Queen Street, so it's right in the heart of Alexandria, Old Town Alexandria's historic district. We're a block from the river, right down by the torpedo factory and where all the shops are.
It's a beautiful area too. Like I said, unfortunately, it was a lot of rain that night, but it's a great place down there. Beautiful springtime, it's going to be very nice in that area. So you guys make sure you hit that. Well, hey, look, first of all, this is us saluting you again, as we say, anybody who served our country and for what you did over in Afghanistan and the stuff. What's the title of that one movie, No Easy Day, or the book? That's right. No Easy Day. Yeah, no easy day being over in Afghanistan. But congrats on the book writing stuff too. And I will tell you, I will apply. I know that you have strict admission requirements. I may not qualify, but when my book is done, I may apply to see if you will seek a variance to allow just somebody to come down there
right now. I got to tell you, by the way, I never say no to authors. We just find a time when we can do it, so I don't care whether somebody's self-published or a first-time author or whatever, we'll find a time. We have the space. And so when we can fit you in, we will definitely do it. And it'll be a lot of fun.
Well, after you have him in there, you may change your policy. So good luck. Hey, Jeff, truly honored to have you on here. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this and giving the extra time, putting up with our silliness here.
And multiple starts.
Yeah, what you did is nothing short of heroic. I think I read where you received the Award of Valor, and you received the Attorney General's Award for exceptional service. Those are high-ranking awards within our law enforcement culture here in the United States. Nothing to be sneezed at. So congratulations on that. Just couldn't be prouder of what you did in service and what you're doing now, brother. Thank you so much for coming on Game of Crimes.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a real honor. And keep up the good work. You guys are such an entertaining podcast, and you guys are fantastic. So I really appreciate it. It's a real honor to be with you.
Yeah, thanks, we know. We understand. We get that.
Here he goes. Here he goes.
I'm humbled by your humbleness.
I'm going to touch something just so you know.
Murph, I know what you're going to touch. Don't do it on video. Okay. All right, you guys, don't go anywhere. You two don't go anywhere. Everybody else, stay tuned for the final debrief. Now, folks, a little bit of magic here. We are recording this, and it will come out, what you're hearing now will come out after Murph is back from Micronesia, because he is taking off to the Federated States of Micronesia. So we can't really say what he found because we don't know yet, because it's still the same day. So.
Yeah, so the second episode should come out the 8th, right? April 8th.
8th and 9th, yeah.
I won't be back in town until April 12th. So, but I can't wait to tell you guys what we find or didn't find.
Listen, now what you found. You will. What if you don't find anything? That's finding something too. So, but anyway, guys. Hey, well, hopefully you guys enjoyed that. I'll tell you what great stories. And first of all, here's a guy who took down a suicide bomber. I mean, the dude has got IEDs that are ready to kill other people, American servicemen and women, and he takes this guy down. I mean, you talk about cojones of steel,
And this is what I love about Jeff's story. This is, and I got to toot DEA's horn here, because, and there are other agencies that have guys that are dedicated just like our people, but it seems like almost everybody in DEA is of the same mindset. You surround yourself with like-minded people. Here's the story of Jeff going over there, and just the guy was going after the detonator in his jacket to detonate an IED, which would have killed, all the people in that general vicinity. And I mean, you heard us, we mentioned to him, would you miss the adrenaline? He's like, oh yeah, it's an adrenaline rush you get every day, and it becomes addictive. It really does. So, just so proud of what he accomplished in DEA. He led the way. He set the standard for a lot of people. In my book, he's a patriot. He's an American hero. And now I love it that he's got this successful writing career. I mean, he's won all kinds of awards. Just go to his website, jeffreyjameshiggins.com. Look at all the things, all the writings he's done, the awards he's won over the years, and now he's supporting his wife with her restaurant. Go check him out there. Jeff, you did a phenomenal job, brother. It's an honor having you here on the show.
And you guys heard us talk about his wife. We hope to have her on too, because she has got a very interesting story. We had Adam Gamal talking about the unit and the Muslim Brotherhood. Mm-hmm. Her story involves her being held captive and her brother being held captive and tortured over in Egypt. So this will be some very interesting stuff. We hope to get that. But hey, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Let us know what you think. Head on over to Apple, Spotify, hit those 5 stars. You can actually leave comments on Spotify as well. So do that. Let us know. And by the way, Sonia is always great about leaving comments. So shout out to Sonia B out there. We don't want to give away your real name in case you're, covert, undercover, somewhere out there. We don't know, but we're here to protect your identity. So, but Sonia B, you know who you are, and we know who you are. Thank you for doing that. Also, head on over to Game of Crimes Podcast for more information about the show. That's where you find the books from the latest book from Jeff up there as well, too. Follow us on that thing they call social media at Game of Crimes on Twitter, Game of Crimes Podcast on Facebook and the Instagram. Also, head on over to Facebook, type in Game of Crimes, and you'll see our fan page run by our favorite mafia queen, Sandy Salvato, rules with the iron fist, with the velvet glove, which Murphy got smacked around with, and now he is back in the good graces of the queen, finally.
Right. Don't tick off the queen, I'm telling you.
Don't. Hey, but you also got to join us, patreon.com/Game of Crimes. Murph is going to need to stay away from cat food for a while because he sunk all his money trying to find out where Amelia Earhart was. So he's going to have to sell his new vehicles and his house and everything if we can't make this thing work, So toss, help a brother out.
That's right. Tell your friends. Bring, please. We're serious when we say tell your friends. We want to grow this podcast, and the more we can grow on here, the better off it's going to be. I understand one of our advertisements recently was from the West Virginia Tourism Bureau. Morgan, I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah, I heard you say something about that. I'm gonna have to start. Maybe it was that West Virginia talk I kept doing about Krusty Krab, West Virginia. It finally triggered the ad, the ad algorithm.
Well, glad to see all my family members up there. Y'all support them now. Go to West Virginia, do some touring.
That's right. I tell you, place. West by God, Virginia. It's a beautiful area out there. Almost as beautiful as Virginia, the real Virginia. So, come visit us. But patreon.com too, patreon.com/Game of Crimes. We got all the good stuff there. We just got through doing our Narcometer, our review of Along Came a Spider. So have to see what we say about that and all the other things, 911, which emergency. And then we'll do Q&A. And in fact, one of the Q&A we'll do, Murph, when you get back is we'll have a Q&A tell us about, your trip. So make sure you join Patreon and we'll do some stuff on that you won't hear on our regular podcast. So that's Excellent. The tease.
Yes.
That's the tease.
Come and check us out.
Check us out. All right. Well, guys, hey, we want to thank you guys always for supporting us. Thank you for being there. Thank you for your comments. And thank you guys once again for playing the biggest, baddest, most dangerous game of all, the Game of Crimes.